You're going to have to decide right now that your relationship with this child is more important than your house being clean all of the time.
Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We are doing 2 episodes this week. I've never done that before, and I'm so thrilled that we're doing it this week. What we're showing on the podcast is a live coaching call. That's what you saw in yesterday's episode 25, a live coaching call with Jessica. And today, episode 26, is the follow-up conversation we had documenting her wins and all of the things that had changed for her within a few months after that coaching call. This is demonstrating in live action the real impact that learning and implementing Connect Method Parenting has on your life. There's a difference between knowing something and doing something. For me, this is where the disconnect always happens. I have a lot of knowledge. I am listening to podcasts and books and courses and have a never-ending desire to learn. But just because I know all of those things doesn't mean I'm able to do all of those things. And that's why I created League, why I created a program where I help people make that transition, bridge that gap from knowing to doing, because it's only when we do that our lives change. So this week, you get to witness this transformation. Right now inside of League, we're taking people through an 8-week parenting pivot to get the foundation of Connect Method Parenting in place. And the shifts that are happening are just so amazing. So I was really thrilled when Jessica agreed to let me share on the public podcast feed, because now you all get to experience the shifts that are happening, get to witness this transformation. So if you haven't listened to episode 25, this is the time to pause this episode and go back to episode 25, because you're going to hear the coaching call that we did together. And then she implemented it and kept at it inside the group. And a couple of months later, we jumped on another call to document her wins. And that's what you're going to hear today in this episode. So enjoy. Oh, I just want to say too, if you have been listening to this podcast and enjoying it and you haven't subscribed yet, will you subscribe to this podcast and leave me a review? That would mean so much to me. I would really appreciate it. It helps get the word out. It helps other people see the podcast. Apple decides to put this and suggest this to people based on how many reviews I get. So if you could go give it a little review, I would be so eternally grateful. All right, enjoy the episode.
I'm delighted to talk about this, actually. So we can even just jump right in.
Yeah.
So 3 months ago, we met on a one-on-one call, and I was in an interesting place. And here's what it looked like. I was struggling because, so I had done a lot of coaching work to recognize that I like my house clean. I don't like it messy. I like my kids doing jobs, right? I like them helping and participating. But I had done a lot of work to sort of disconnect my emotional well-being on both of those two things, both the state of my house and on my kids doing their chores. That is not a perfect system. I can say that I've done a lot of work on that, but still tomorrow when it's a mess, I can find myself having to again take deep breaths and remind myself, okay, yep, I like the house clean. Today it's messy. This morning, it's right now at this moment, it's messy. And can I embrace my house and my life right now in the messiness? That is so much, I think, of the work that you're doing in League. And it's so important. It's so beautiful to learn to disconnect our emotional well-being from the circumstances around us, but so
Right.
particularly our house and our children's behavior. And those things often intersect. It's your living space and it's your everything. It's your workspace. It is tricky. There is something to say for the fact that when the house is clean, it's just easier to think positive thoughts. It's just easier to think thoughts about, I'm enough. I'm doing something right? It's easier. We just connect those. It's a natural.
I think in Western society, especially, we've connected our value to certain accomplishments. So it's so common that especially as mothers, less as dads, for some reason, dads don't get some do, but less so. Yeah. The house is a big one. It's such a visual sign of success to so many of us.
And I don't know enough about Eastern civilization to say, but whenever I see the life-changing magic of tidying up, for instance, like Marie Kondo. It does seem
Yes.
to me like Eastern civilizations, if we're like to group them all in one, I don't know that we can group them all, but there's something to say for just cleanliness and tidiness. And I think probably a lot of, all, it just depends. It's person to person for sure. Anyway,
Yeah.
so backtracking to where I was, I had done a lot of work. So I could face the house and be like, okay, in the same way I can start to face myself. Like, yeah, it's nice to be happy, but today I'm sad or today I'm super stressed. And I'm learning and have been for years, like this is the process, I think, of coaching. It's constantly evolving, but just learning how to be okay with the present, like learning how to just be in the present. It's not always fun. It's sometimes very uncomfortable. So learning how to be present with a messy house or with kids who aren't willing to do chores, like, okay, they're not up for it at this moment. And I get to choose if I'm going to come unglued and be upset about that or just, well, here we are. So I was there. And it was a funny conversation when we had our coaching call because you did a good job of assessing, like asking questions to make sure that, where's the discomfort coming from? And I think, we both came to the joint analysis that like, okay, yeah, you're in a barely clean place. Not always, it's a work in progress. Yeah. But when I was in this clean place, what would happen is, so we were even coaching on a Saturday, I believe it was a chore day. And I had a daughter who had an assignment to sweep the dining room as part of a larger, she had to clean the dining room, but sweeping was the next on the list. And we talked through this like scenario where I am neutral. I recognize she doesn't want to, and I'm not like throwing out consequences or rewards. Like, no, you got to do it or else, or, hey, if you do this, then we can have, let's have an ice cream break. Right. And there was like in that planned day, a later activity where we were going to go swimming as a family in the afternoon, but we were kind of in this space, and it's kind of what it felt like in my house was like sort of a no man's land where my children would just, and we have kind of a family boundary that you need to get your chores done if you're going to do personal screen time, usually after lunch. And I was hitting this recurring situation with my kids where they just would just not do the chores. And they knew the boundary, so they wouldn't do screens later. It's like, well, it's not really worth it to me. And without that sort of easy fix of either rewards or consequences, I would find myself in this kind of like, again, no man's land of like, well, okay, let's see, you're not going to do it. We're not doing anything. It was just so interesting. And that's where I came to Andy. I was like, okay, I'm stymied. Like I'm feeling fine. Like, so the house doesn't get clean about half the time. Sometimes they'll do it. Sometimes they don't. And we had just such a good conversation that you explained, I think it was an interesting one for you too. Like, this is kind of a fun puzzle, but like maybe the next step is just training. We're just in training, and the training looks like, okay, we're a family and we're doing jobs right now. And the connection piece was also there too. So I need to backtrack and say, like, I do feel pretty connected to these kids. Like, I feel like they get time with me. I feel like we have a respectful two-way. I mean, it's obviously we're always a work in progress. I say all this and I think, yeah. And then I come home from school today and all the chaos. I'm sure I will, if anyone were to be watching, I don't know that I'd pass muster all the time, but for the most part, we have a pretty working relationship. I'm willing to say, I'm sorry. I'm willing to recognize I'm wrong. I'm willing to lean in and listen when they're like, no, this is not working for me. And I can sit through most of the negative emotions, not all of them, but
So good.
So we're there and my kids weren't really working. And it was like, okay, all right. So I totally ascribe to the belief that consequences and rewards, oh man, when you presented this, it was like mind blowing. Yes. That is right. It just felt so resonant. So I took that out of my vocabulary. And then here we are with a child who's sitting there on the couch like, well, I don't think I really want to sweep the floor. And so it just was so interesting to have this conversation about what it will be like to sort of physically or metaphysically take this child by the hand and say, I know you don't want to work, but this is just what we're going to do. And I'm here to help you. What can I do to help you? Or offering 20 minutes of like, oh, you've got me for 20 minutes, whatever, or letting them give me directions. Like, it was so interesting that it was this, I have a little bit of a role here. It seems like it shouldn't be rocket science, but it sort of was. it's time to just train them, not with a promise of something at the end or a threat of something, but just say, I know, here is what we're going to do. And this is what became the vocabulary with my children for the last 3 months. And it's not for the faint of heart, let me tell you. It was a very difficult, and we're not even, you said, we're not in a solution phase, but I did tell them
shifting.
There's a shift.
This shift in consequences. This is a question that I get all of the time because people think if I don't have consequences, I lose all power. Mm-hmm. I lose all control. Like I'm passive. I'm just going to be passive, I guess, and let them just run around the house. And I gotta, so I would love from your perspective as you're thinking about how that journey for you or what that looks like for you in real life. Can you explain that for people?
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, at first it does feel like you've lost your control for sure. Mm-hmm. You are going to feel like the ground is uneven underneath you because it has been a place of control and you are relinquishing that control.
Perceived control. It's been perceived or very heavy-handed. Wouldn't you say like temporary control? I'm trying to think other words that, because you're right. If we play that right, we can kind of get our kids to do stuff, but it just comes at this cost and it's not self-sustaining. Yeah.
That's a really good point. I think I would call it short-term control. Because it is short-term control. It's kind of like a trained pet, right? I'll give you this treat if you sit. So the pet sits and they get the treat. So you're saying sit, the pet is sitting. And there is just this kind of like, there's a treat reward for that animal, but there is like this sort of mentally stimulating reward for you of like, oh, I say animal does, right? So it is sort of a reinforced sense of control. I mean, it is a short term for sure. And it comes at such, I like how you say that. It just comes at such a great long-term cost.
Yeah. We get the immediate dopamine hit of, ooh, I got something.
Yes, this is working. My child is listening. And you see this too all around you, like when you're at the park with moms and their kids or the grocery store, things where you see it's almost like a childish sense of control or being out of control. So you see kind of the smugness when a parent says, sit down, and the child immediately sits down. Like this parent feels good inside, like, oh yes, everything, all is as it should be. And you also see the opposite when you're at the grocery store and a kid is throwing a tantrum and screaming, the parent saying, stop crying. And of course the kid, it's just because there wasn't really ever any control anyway. But for that parent, they are having an internal tantrum because and you know that for a lot of these parents, they're going to go home and punish that child or show them who's boss because that child didn't obey, right? Like I say, you do. That's just your role. And so really it's such a change. You're changing. It's interesting too, to compare this to like, if you have a spouse, for instance, or a boyfriend, or even a really close friend, you don't tell your friend, hey, sit down. No, I said, sit down, right?
Right. Yes.
That's not how we talk to them because the relationship is different because I respect them. I value them. I am not the boss of them, but we somehow think that for our children, I'm the boss. I say sit, you sit. And so there is this will not work unless you determine, I want a different relationship with my child, one that's going to outlast their toddler years, one that's going to last throughout their lives and mine, one that is, it goes two ways, that I value them, that I see them, that I hear them, that I want to be around them. And then they'll want to be around me. They'll want to hear me. They'll want to see me. So it doesn't work without that shift. And not all parents are capable of making that shift, nor do they want to,
Yeah, it can be very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, to make the shift.
And it can also feel wrong. It can feel like that's not the social norm. And it can feel like what you said, well, then I'll just become a passive parent and my kids will just do whatever they want and they're ruling me. All of these things, right? Those are all allowable thoughts and you get to choose your own adventure, right? Everyone does. And so this work is not for everyone. I think it's very courageous and very thoughtful parents who take this sort of work on. So kudos to you if you are doing this work because it is so hard. You're sometimes having to disentangle yourself from generations of ways of thinking about things, right? Which
Yeah.
is that the parent is the authority, the child does what the parent says, or social norms of like what respectful children should look like. So many things that you're going to have to kind of wade through, and you're going to have to stay really clearly focused on what I want. I want this child, and I want them forever. I don't want their behavior. I don't want them to sweep my floors. I want them, and I want all of them. And I want to understand them and hear them and be, again, here's where the other thoughts will come up. Like, well, I'm not their friend. I'm their parent, right?
Oh, you hear
Sure.
that all the time.
All the time. It's like, sure, that's fine. Be their parent and let that look like whatever you want it to look like. For me, I want that to be different than what preconceived notions of maybe parent should look like, because these children will eventually be adults, and I want our relationships for the long term. So I'm playing the long game.
Yeah. And this
Yeah.
is the long game.
It
Really.
is the long game.
But it comes with sometimes that short-term discomfort sometimes,
Right,
because you don't.
exactly.
It's like have you ever I've recently trying to eat healthier. So I'm not eating the sugar, and that sugar, it's so fascinating. It gives me this perception of satisfaction, but in the long term, it just doesn't pay off. That's a very cliche analogy to compare it to, but it's so similar, that dopamine hit. And do I want the body I get from eating sugar in 10 years and what that creates for me, or the body I get when I decide to eat healthier? And so, yeah, it's a challenging thing at first until we realize, one, the cost of consequences in a punitive way. When I use consequences pretty liberally, but it's only because typically they're done very punitively. So if you're doing it in a very connective way, we could use that word, but typically it's so hard to disconnect from that. Yeah. Right. But I love how you describe that. That's so good. If you're new to Connect Method Parenting, I have a great way for you to get started. I created a free course that covers some of the biggest challenges parents are facing and how Connect Method Parenting solves them. In an hour, we're going to talk about why parenting is so hard, how to get your kids to want to listen to you, how to stop yelling and losing your cool, and become that calm, confident, connected parent for good. It's the fastest way to get started using connection as your go-to tool for influencing and impacting your kids. Go to cmp.works/course to get instant access today.
Yeah. So I can totally speak now to like the discomfort and the daily of
what
the last
happened
3 months.
as I challenged you to let go of this paradigm. Yes.
Yeah, it was so interesting. Well, and the paradigm, I think, was happening, and I had sort of disengaged, but then it was like, okay, now what? Right? Like now when I don't have these, like how
the living in the paradigm. It's like I understand it academically.
And I can mentally and like even emotionally like calm my nervous system down to be like, okay, sometimes it's going to be a mess. Sometimes kids are going to work. Can I love them as much when they're not working as when they are working? This is an interesting question. And yes, I think the answer is I can. Like, I think I've learned to just recognize like, yeah, you're just not really having a work day today. And I love you. This isn't really convenient on my end. You do you, girl. Sometimes I'm not having a work day either. So here we are, right? It's just giving them the same grace that I would like extended to me. You know, I don't have someone coming home at the end of the day and saying, what? Look at this messy house. Why didn't you get your stuff done? Because that, man.
Well, and that's an interesting thing to point out, because if we did have a partner that did that, okay, you get the keys taken away and you don't get to drive the car anymore. Could you imagine?
Well, I mean, we probably have to tread carefully, because there probably are some relationships like that, right?
Yeah. But it doesn't feel super intimate, and I may not feel they're understanding. Maybe I had a really rough day, or I didn't feel well, or I'm struggling in some way, so I didn't get all these things done I said I would. But to have someone come in
and be the outside, and I have to be
that. Yeah, it's hard to want to open up to them.
It's
about the deepest things that I'm struggling with. I'm trying to know. You can go a couple ways: either feel bad, or then try to defend yourself.
Right, and opening up in an effort to defend yourself, rather than opening up in just a straight like pure effort for connection. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
to have them really know you.
Yeah. You're using it as a defense mechanism rather than as just a connection tool, for sure.
It doesn't feel very good.
Yeah, absolutely. And that being said, I have to like acknowledge that I probably am more that spouse to my husband sometimes than vice versa. Certainly, like, wait, you gave them sugar cereal for dinner? Like, what?
Yeah. We can go into that punishment mode with our partner, with our
Yes. Yes.
sister, and it's not even a problem that it happens. It's just good to say like, wow, that's happening. And do I
Yes.
want to keep it? It's
Yeah.
fine that it's happened, right?
And that has also been some amazing work that I've been doing over the last few years in my marriage, recognizing that, yeah, wow. I even apologized to my husband, like, I am so sorry for the first few years of our
Oh, me
marriage.
too. I
Like,
had to do a lot of apologizing.
oh, yep. So
Yeah.
good. But it's good, right? We're moving to a healthy place and we are being vulnerable and recognizing and opening. And so that, right, that type of relationship, one that I'm forming better in my marriage, is also the kind that I want to start cultivating with my kids. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Okay, tell me more about this. Let me understand. Right. Okay. So we're there, we're in that space and jobs aren't really getting done. And so then what? Okay. So then taking them by the hand. So I'll just go into what happened like directly after
This is
that call.
after our call. Yeah. So we have the
After that
call.
call that day, you had that call. We talked about what it would look like to be in training mode as a mother. Like, okay, I recognize you don't want to do this. I understand. I don't really like it either, but this is what we're doing right now. And so I'm here. I'm willing to help you. These are my parameters. It's not me being a doormat either, right? Like, this is how much time I
Exactly.
have to offer you. I'm willing to assist. You can give me directions. We could try and turn on some music or make it a game, but it needs to happen. How do you want to do it?
Right.
So I left that call, found my daughter still on the couch.
I love it. So good. It's like the opportunity presents itself. And I do want to say, like with Jessica specifically, this might not always be the outcome of a conversation I have with someone who's working through this, but it was very clear that it was the focus that would be best for her would be to like train, to come
Yeah.
alongside, to understand more. So anyway, just setting that up. And I think you
Yeah.
said that, but just
Fair
to
enough.
bring it back home again. Yeah.
Right.
So your
Just to
daughter's
make
on the
sure that,
couch.
yeah,
What
she's
happens then?
and I reminded her, like, okay, it's time for zone cleaning. We're doing our zones. And she just said, why do we have to clean the house? It doesn't really matter. Right. So we're getting to these metaphysical questions, like, it's just gonna get messy again, right? Why are you
Mm-hmm.
like, I said, I know, something along the lines of, yes, I hear you. It's true. It's just never ending, right? Just does right. So just like acknowledging, it's tricky to acknowledge without feeling like you're just doing lip service, but like, I get it, right? And even going in on that with her, I am totally understand, why do we do this? I don't think we went down that rabbit hole at that moment, but I have done it with my kids before.
And I think it's really important because I talk to so many parents who are like, well, no, I was calm on the outside. Like I
Yeah.
said all the words that we talked
Yeah.
about saying,
Yeah.
but when we dive in,
Mm-hmm.
there's it's not
Yeah.
congruent yet. And that's totally
Right.
fine too. It's just it is important that it's not just lip service. And if it's not,
Totally.
we just figure out how to get it congruent if it can be or what's in the way. So
Yeah.
good point to bring up. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes those rabbit holes are very useful and they can get very philosophical. Like, that is a
Yeah.
good question. Why do we do this? Like, it's so ridiculous. It's going to get dirty tomorrow. So like going with them down that rabbit hole, I don't think we did it at that moment. Cause I remember the next thing she asked me was like, can't you just tell me that I'll get to go swimming when I'm done or something? Like, these were her exact words. Like,
Yeah.
she was literally asking for a reward. Please give me an external motivation. I'm trained for this. Can you just please hand it over? I need something to get me off the couch. Like, she was speaking the language that we have been speaking for years in our family. Please,
Mm,
I need this thing. Can you please give it to me? And so you and I had discussed this too, about how important it was to not make family activities conditional on,
mhm.
like, if you have a scheduled family activity. And so that's what I did. I reminded her, I said it really gently, like, actually, no, we are all going to swim at 3 and it will be so fun. We're so excited, right? It's beginning of summer. This is so exciting. And we're going to swim at 3, whether we get jobs done or not. That's a family activity. Now, those were weird words coming from me because I like definitely used family activities as conditional ones before, much to my backfiring. It's a terrible strategy. Don't do it. The
Words of
worst
wisdom
one.
from
Oh,
Jessica.
it is. It's yeah, words of. Though the worst time was when we were going on a trip to visit my parents, and I had made it at some point, just thrown it out to my 11-year-old, like, well, if you don't get it done, you're not going to grandma's house. And so at some point he said, fine, I don't want to go to grandma's house. And then he
Yes.
stuck by that tune. And much to my remorse and having to backpedal and then repent of my words, and then also trying to fix a bridge that I had chopped down, which was, his potential relationship with his grandparents, right? Just like that whole setup in terms of anyway. So don't make family events conditional for sure. So I said, whether we get jobs done or not, we're going swimming at 3, which of course is not motivating to her. And so I told her, said like, yeah, nope, no rewards. We're not doing rewards or consequences. And I actually had talked through this with my kids, like, we're going to try something new. We're not going to do rewards or consequences. We're just going to do it. We're just going to do jobs. And so I said, I'll be with you though. Let's go. I'll be with you. Let's try this together. This is the part I think that's really, really important to recognize. You're going to need to have like a superhuman amount of patience in this transition from like, I say you jump to, I say we have a conversation, you ask questions, I listen, we think about it, and then maybe it happens. And you're going to have to decide right now that your relationship with this child is more important than your house being clean all of the time. Because part of the time it won't be.
It won't be. But you know what's crazy is it wasn't before either.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful?
We're like, oh, but if I have consequences, it'll always be clean. No.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
You have the messy house and a lot of icky feelings floating around.
Oh my goodness, that is so good.
It's the same either way. It
totally was. It totally was. That is so ironic. That is so ironic.
I know, right? It's crazy how our brains are so programmed. But I hope that will give people relief as they do the transition, because it's like, well, it's actually the same as before.
Yeah. What's changing is you. Yeah.
And then the momentum, if you can change yourself and how you're inviting the kids to do whatever, in this case, inviting them to do the chores, as that relationship and trust strengthens, so does their willingness to listen and cooperate without the need. But at first, you're right. They're addicted to the consequences or rewards, just like I was addicted to sugar. It's like, I need that. I need that.
Yes.
I don't know what to do if that structure's not here. What do we do? I have no idea. And for both parties, parents and children.
It is so interesting because, she was asking for the reward. And then partway through that very same chore, I saw the flip side of it, the consequence side of it, which was so interesting. So she'd asked for a reward. We said we weren't doing that. And she's kind of like sweeping, like really slowly pausing for breaks. It was very
so
funny.
Good.
And at some point, I think my husband had come in the house and he'd barked at one of my older kids. I don't remember why. Something had happened. Literally, I have no recollection, but he kind of slammed something on the table and said that kid's name really loud. It was a loud jump. And out of the corner of my eye, I was kind of in the same area as my daughter, just being there. I don't know how much of a support I was.
You were slowly sweeping too.
I didn't have my own broom, so I was just kind of giving encouraging words. I know it's no fun. Yeah, I'm over here doing dishes. This is what we do. Mm-hmm. There was this loud noise, this slam and this bark, something that's normally associated with kind of just like a verbal consequence. And I saw her all of a sudden snap to attention and start sweeping really, really quickly.
Interesting.
So fascinating. It was. And I felt like in that moment I had seen, even in just that one dining room sweeping experience, I had seen both the desire for a reward, and on the other side, like this loud noise, right? Consequence. Not that we're really yellers, but every once in a while, when there's like something really big, which it must have been, and I really don't know what it was, but she heard that and it immediately jolted her into like quick or I'll be in trouble mindset. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of launched her back into some effort for a minute. And it was so interesting. Like you said, they're addicted to both rewards or consequences, right? So that was just the beginning of the summer. And the summer has just been a very long, and it's kind of turned into a family joke. No rewards and no consequences. And they all think it's so funny. And the phrase that we've been using ad nauseum is, I don't want to. And I explained this, especially my 7-year-old is just really struggling. Like, I don't want to. And so she walks, and I said, I know. And so this has been the conversation. Mm-hmm. And when you were a baby, you could say, I don't want to. And then you just don't do it because you don't want to. But as you become a big kid, as you become an adult, and, my other kids are listening to this too, it changes. If I don't want to do this, like I don't want to make breakfast, I don't want to drive the car, I don't want to take you to your music lessons, I don't want to. If I didn't do the things I didn't want to do, look at all the things that wouldn't be happening. Right. And so the phrase this summer has been, I don't want to. And then she'll roll her eyes when I repeat that back to her, because she'll say, I don't want to. And they'll say, I know, I don't want to. And she rolls her eyes like, oh, mom, I don't want to, and I'm going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, mom. Like, so we'll say that. And half the time she actually still won't do it. Like, so again, going back to that patience piece, like if you are not prepared for this, it's going
Yes.
to just drive you insane. So we are doing training, but it is like training wheels. They fall off the bicycle all of the time. And it really does look like half the time it still doesn't get done. But there is a slight shift. I do feel like there's a slight shift in the culture of mom, I don't want to. And I'll say this, I'll say, and like, oh, I don't want to either. And like, oh, mom. Right. But it's a shifting, right? It's a them hearing that, them internalizing that phrase, whether they like it or not, because they know what comes next, which means they've internalized the phrase.
So good. I love that you've done that phrase. It's so good. There's a couple things that popped up for me when you were talking is when you said half the time they still don't do it.
Yeah.
I just have to bring the parallel back. Half the time we issue consequences, they don't do it either.
Right.
Isn't that true? Like
Yeah.
for some reason we forget about the 10 times that we had to ask them and
Yeah.
remind them, and then it escalates to we ask nicely first, hopefully, hoping, crossing fingers that they'll just do it, but they typically won't if we've trained them not to, and they're waiting for whatever escalates. So it's still
so interesting. That loud noise, that smackdown, right? Like that,
right? Or the hey, no, if you don't do this, this XYZ is going to happen.
Big enough one.
It's still the same thing, but the thing we're training them to do is to be in the cycle and to resist, and to think it's not worth their effort.
Yes.
Or that it like I don't want to and I shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
Instead of, we're training them to like, I don't want to. And also, I don't want to is such, for some of us, that's very triggering. It's like, how dare you not want to help out with the kitchen? That's, heresy. Like we help in our family. We're hard workers,
Right.
So if we can just normalize it like you've done.
Yeah.
And just, it's fine. Like they don't want to, like, that's normal. Like no problem. And it's doesn't mean anything terrible about them other than they're just a human. And what I want them to learn is through life, there should be so many things that are uncomfortable, that push them, that initially their initial reactions, I don't want to, and learning, which you've applied this so beautifully and in a unique way. And I love it. But like, I don't want to. And that's okay. Because sometimes too, they think I don't want to, and that means I shouldn't have to.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now you're overriding that. Like, no, it's okay to not want to, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it or it's not good for you. Like,
we're changing that.
Let's change that in our dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to, and I'm going to do it anyway, which we used just even like last week with my son who was grumpy about schoolwork being behind and having a rough day. And it was dinner time and he's like, I don't want to come to dinner. So like, we both had to like kind of do a frustration cleanse. Like he needed his break too.
Calm that nervous system down.
Oh man. And I went to his room and I like really channeled like all my love for him. And I said, you know what? I totally understand. You probably need a break. You need a break from me. You need a break from everybody. You just need some time to yourself. I know you need that. Let's get you that. But for right now, it's dinner time. And you can say, I don't want to come to dinner, but I'm going to come anyway, because with our family, we do dinner as a family on the days that we're able to.
Right.
And I don't want to eat lentil soup. I'm not coming because I don't want to eat lentil soup for dinner, which he ended up eating 2 bowlfuls of because he is so funny. He's my one kid that will say he hates something and then he always, not always, but often eats it. But yeah, so it was again normalizing that, like, but with love and compassion. Like, I recognize what you need right now. I recognize you need a break. I see that you're struggling, but the timing is such at this moment, right? So again, it was bringing it back to, I know you don't want to come. I know you really need a break. Like, and I really actually had compassion for that. I think even as I said that, I recognized how true that was.
Yes.
And how much
it and meet.
I totally
there was no tug of war. What you're describing, there's no tug of war, because as soon as you go into, no, you don't need a break, or you have to come to dinner.
Yeah.
Now you're going into a nervous system activated state, and now his body's going to think it needs to defend, and
he's going to fight and yell and not come.
Logic is going to help with reason. None of that's going to work. So
so acknowledging fully his case and also having compassion on that and saying, I recognize that. However, sometimes it's again that mentality of we do things that we don't want to do. I know you don't want to come to dinner right now, but And I do feel like this was a direct flow out of what we've been doing this summer, this training that was for me as well as for him. But just like I had words to put to it because in the past I didn't really know what to do. I would recognize, yeah, he needs a break. I should just leave him alone. A well about family dinner, which we only get a few times a week anyway, because there's so many activities that we're doing.
Yeah.
And it felt like empowering to me. So this is in response to people who say, well, I don't have control. I felt so empowered in that moment. Like everything had changed for me. I felt like I could totally, with so much love, say, I recognize that you need a break. I recognize this is not fun. I recognize you don't want this right now, but we do family dinner. And so you don't want to come, but you are going to come anyway. Right.
He was able to opt in and then eat 2 bowls of soup, which is hilarious, right? Because he obviously fully opted into the dinner.
He did. After sitting there for a while and watching everybody eat it. So said, and you don't have to eat anything. You just come sit at the table. This is the expectation for our family. You just come and sit with us. You can just watch us eat. And he saw everyone eating, and it was just so classic. At one point, and during his second bowl, I gave him a look and I was like, how's the soup? And he gave me a grumpy face, like, don't talk to me about it. But like a funny grumpy face. Like we had it
playfully interacting with you.
Yeah. But yeah, for me, that was a moment where it just really did feel like all of this work, because it has been tricky. It has been tricky. Yeah. It's a disentangling. It's a being willing to hold space. It's keeping myself in a clean emotional place. And then just like not having that dopamine hit, that sugar to go to all summer of like, I say you do. And instead sitting with that or sitting with them or, having the conversation or saying, I'll tell you what, I have this availability. I'm willing to help you. And just even sitting with the discomfort of, yeah, I know you don't want to, but we're going to do it anyway, which probably could be the same words that I'm using on myself. Like, oh, I do not want to do this right now, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to get myself in a clean place. I'm going to sit through this discomfort. I'm going to offer to help you. I'm going to try and meet you at your level.
Right.
And I'm also going to be okay if you ultimately don't do anything. And that is, I would say, one of the harder parts of this learning curve is I have to know going into it at the beginning that I'm going to be emotionally fine, whether they do the chore or not. And like you pointed out, though, I mean, that's what was happening before. It was a 50-50 before.
But you just weren't emotionally okay.
But I wasn't emotionally okay.
Which then damages the relationship. So the results at that first initial level of entry where it feels like you've lost control and you're learning to be emotionally fine when they don't do it, it's the external result looks the same. The chore is still not getting done, but I'm just actually in a way better place emotionally to show up for them versus I'm in a terrible place emotionally to show up for them. And I need them to do the chore for me to feel good about myself versus I feel good about myself regardless of if they do the chore right now or not. And I'm committed to figuring out how to help them do the chore.
Yeah. And I would even add a little nuance with that. I feel good whether or not they do it. I would say I'm going to be present with myself whether or not they do it. Like I'm probably not going to feel good, right? Like the initial reaction when it doesn't get done, I'm not like, whoo, I feel fine, right?
Yeah, it's more of an accepting. That's probably a better way to say it. Like, I'm going to accept that this is my reality.
Yes. I'm going to be present with myself for whatever the outcome is. And I'm going to choose to love this child and remember that I'm trying to really come closer to that concept of unconditional love. Can I love this child if they don't do the thing? Can I love them when they are being, mean or sassy or whatever? Can I love them the same level? And what gets in the way, obviously, is my emotional discomfort. So can I stay with myself and process through that? Because that's what gets in the way of us being able to love them, right? Is our own
their own stuff.
Big emotions. Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people say, as they're learning about this, that they're afraid that the unconditional love means they're condoning or they're just passive. And that's not what it means. Like unconditionally loving the child, accepting the reality for what it is, doesn't mean that I'm not going to still keep evaluating how this could be better for our family, how this could get cleaner or the chores could get done. I'm not giving up that. In fact, I'm more empowered because my brain is actually more on board. Because I'm not going to spend 24 hours trying to get myself to calm back down. So I'm in a good emotional place again. So I can think with my
Yes.
prefrontal cortex. Because when our emotions are high, our intelligence is low.
Yes.
And I love the I think it's Byron Katie, where she says you can fight against reality, but you only lose 100% of the time. So it's so good. It's like you can totally fight against it. You just will only lose 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And I love that. And when I first heard that years and years ago, I was really confusing. I thought, what does she mean? I have no idea what this means.
Yes.
But because I was confused and I thought, well, if I just accept reality, I'm just giving up on my future hopes and dreams. But that's not what she's saying. She's saying just be calm right now so you can actually create more of your future hopes and dreams. And with your kids, be calm right now so you can maintain the relationship. Not so that you can. I love connection for connection's sake, not as another form of manipulation or they can see right through that. But knowing that if I'm present, connected, not triggered, ultimately that gives me a better chance for them actually being interested in what matters to me. Otherwise, they're just not interested at all. Like, you want me to do my room, clean my room? No, thank you. Just because you want it, I won't,
because you
can
want
we get
it.
to that state.
Yeah. We could get metaphysical about the state of chaos, Mom, and how everything the universe is moving towards one direction. Why fight the universe?
That sounds,
We have conversations. I think it is interesting to question. I wonder if for some people watching these interactions from the outside with you and your child, that it maybe looks like, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm just kind of wrapping my brain around it, that maybe it does look like you're a doormat or look like you're being passive because it doesn't look like what we kind of expect. If you expect that a parent says and a child does, and you're not seeing that interaction, then maybe what you're seeing in your perception is a parent who's just being a doormat, right? But there is so much more going on there. And that's true of anything in the world. An outsider's perception of what is happening, in any, like when a tree dies, for instance, and then like there's ash everywhere and it maybe just looks so awful, but really when an evergreen tree dies, that's when its seeds are released. And so now you're growing a forest from what looked like just ashes, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's to those people who would say that, they might still only see that, right, from the outside. And you'll get flack. You get flack from, in-laws or grandparents or other parents who just who have even commented to me before. And I've had this, right? Like people will be like, well, I just don't believe in letting kids do whatever they want as they're watching my interactions.
That's their perception of what's happening, even though that's not at all what's happening. Yes.
Exactly. And that's fine. It's so important to also let that go as well. And whether you can just kind of like have an internal smile and like hug for yourself of like, maybe that's what you're seeing, but I just love what we're doing here. I actually sort of pride myself on how I love that interaction sometimes when someone will, in all of their convicted wisdom of how parenting should go, sort of give me advice or mild, gentle censure. And I think I just love you and you have no idea, but I'm rocking it actually. And you just don't even know.
Yeah.
And that's a far cry from, because sometimes it can just feel so dangerous and so threatening and you can get so upset and want to defend and prove. And I've certainly been there too. But there is something lovely when you can just own this and know like, oh no, what we're doing, you have no idea. We are moving mountains over here. And if you only knew, I wish you had this for yourself and your child because it's so much better.
Yeah, it's so much better. It's so fun to just see the progression of how it works to transition, to release that idea that consequences are working. I think that's actually part of the misconception is they are working. The punitive kind that we typically do are the rewards.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing. Any other things that you think would help wrap it up or explain anything or things that we've missed?
I think just with all of this, it's so useful to reiterate that I very much don't feel like I've got it figured out, right? I feel like tomorrow, the next day, the next week, the next day, that it will be. Here's an interesting analogy. It's a religious analogy, but we were learning about Paul and how he'd had this transformation, like this giant transformation from Saul to Paul. And he had this vision. He saw God. He's now an apostle. But in his letters, in his epistles that he writes to all over the world as he knew it, to all the different saints in different areas, he only ever mentions his vision 2 times. And he does so very, very briefly. Instead, what he talks about in copious amounts are his struggles with this, how he's the weakest of all saints and how he has a thorn in his side and how he just wishes that he were better. And he spends the rest of his life as this great apostle as we see him from the outside. Again, this is perception versus someone's reality. But his reality was that he loved Jesus and he felt his flaws deeply and talked about them frequently and was willing to be vulnerable about that. And I think that is what hit me so powerfully this weekend as I've just been thinking about, okay, cool. I had this cool experience. I've had lots of cool experiences. We can look to those like lodestar experiences and be like, oh yeah, I was changing. But really, we're in the daily, right? And the daily is going to hit every day. It's going to be different. It's going to be ups and downs. It's going to be your emotional equilibrium is off and it's here and it's there. And I think that is, there's not one moment in time that I could say, yep, figured it out. It's going to be so much fluctuation for the rest of my life, and being willing to be on that ride and to, have the long-term vision and the goals, and also have so much compassion for the ups and downs that I'm going to experience, that my children are going to experience. And I think that's what faith is, really, just like knowing, all right, we've got this, we can do this, and it's going to be super messy, and that is okay.
That is life. It's even more than okay. There's no way around it. I love that you brought that up, because the vulnerability of being willing to admit our mistakes or our flaws or our disappointments, things that just didn't go the way we wanted to, is the key, I think, to growth and shifting. And it's funny because we both at the beginning were talking about how we both have, we're life coaches, we help people with things, and we also have that help ourselves, to help us inspect our brains. And I think that is exactly what you're just saying, is being able to be honest with someone, like, this is where I'm just not where I want to be. And I can't quite figure it out on my own. Can you help me see where I'm missing things? And then I love the process now. I'm so excited to tell someone all the places that I need help with, because I know that the yield is so worth it. It's worth talking about the struggles, because that's how I get to the next level of who I want to be. And I'm always wanting to be someone different. Not like I want to be someone other than me, but I want to be a new version of me. I would love nothing more than in a year I look back and I love the person I was, but I'm also in awe of how much growth and who I am today. And so pushing and progress requires discomfort. It requires vulnerability. And with parenting, especially, I think it's shifting, but there still seems to be some shame around it, or I'm not allowed to struggle with parenting. I should know this.
Yeah.
It's just not the truth, especially when we're shifting paradigms based on science. It's all based on, reality. It's not up in La La Land, but it is different than a lot of what we've been taught or inherited from society. And so being vulnerable, willing to say, hey, there's lots more for me to shift. I can do that. And I just love where I am today too. So that's such a good point. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. And I just jotted down one of your phrases. I love this phrase. The yield is so worth it. It's beautiful.
I'm so glad you captured that. I didn't even remember I said that. Sometimes it just comes out, but it is so worth it. And the yield of connection is amazing relationships, trust, helping our children have nervous systems that can regulate faster. It's not going to mean we don't get disconnected from our kids, and they're not going to struggle, and we're going to not be stumped sometimes, or we're not going to mess up. But it's just that we will be more and more equipped to handle anything that comes our way with confidence, knowing that nothing can shake our relationship. So we'll get through this. And even if I mess up terribly, I have so much invested in this relationship that it's recoverable. I'm not afraid of that anymore. I used to be afraid of that. Like, I'm just going to mess up so bad that they're not going to want anything, to do with me down the road, because I just can't get this right. Yeah. And that doesn't have to be part of our reality. So the yield, which goes along with my farmer. I always say we're like, not farmer, more of like a gardener, we're the parents of the gardener. So if we think of that analogy of us being the gardener and trying to help our children, who are these seeds, grow, to focus on the yield of that is so powerful. It's so good. Oh my gosh, I loved this so much. I'm so glad you shared. Thank you.
Yes, this was great.
Wise words and honesty about, hey, there's more to learn, and I'm making progress, and we're figuring this out.
Yes.
And I love that. I don't want to, but Man, if
Yeah.
all of us learn that, that's
right. The adults too, as well as the kids.
like all of us.
It could be the title of this. I don't want to, but
I know maybe it will be. Maybe that's what we'll title it. So good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was great. This was fantastic. Thanks. I feel inspired to like, okay, pick myself up and keep going. I can keep doing it. It's so nice to have these check-ins. And I think that is like what you were saying, like even having that at the beginning of the summer, celebrate the win.
You don't want to celebrate when your brain's like, no, I want to focus on all things that are going wrong. I'm like, no, you've been winning, Jessica. Tell me all about it.
Right. Celebrate the win. And then it kind of energizes you to keep going like, yes, I can do this. I know I got this. We're getting it. Right. It's changing. Yes. The dialogue is shifting. The mentality is shifting. And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let it be the catalyst for the next
for the next round, whatever is coming.
Yeah, whatever's coming with your kids or you or whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just had such a good time talking about this. So we'll have to do it again.
Well, thank you.
Next round, we'll talk about it again.
Yeah, right. Next big problem. I'll be ready. Like, let's do this.
We'll celebrate the win. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, come check out League, my Connect Method parenting coaching program, where we take this material and we apply it using my proven formula. Head over to cmp.works/join.